And while it's true that we are finishing right now Milstein Hall and the museum, both of which will be open, they say, in August. I find that sort of incomprehensible as I drive and walk around Milstein Hall, but they say it's going to be open in August. And as we've just opened the Physical Sciences building, a lot of the construction on the endowed side of the campus will be much slowed because we're just not taking on that level of commitment. On the contract side, the statutory side, it's quite different. And you would say, how can that be? Because New York State is broke, and it is broke. But of course, if you're building buildings, that creates jobs, and jobs is what we need in New York State. So actually, the SUNY Construction Fund is doing quite well right now, and there are a number of significant projects on the campus. Stocking Hall, which if you've been around campus, you see they're getting ready to renovate Warren Hall. They've just finished the animal diagnostic lab. So that I think you'll continue to see a bit of construction of some measure on the contract college. Probably the one building that we'll see coming up on the endowed side in the near future will be the new Gates Hall, as in Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation, to house our Faculty of Computing and Information Sciences. And that's going to be built on the parking lot, sad to say, a few more parking spaces going to be displaced, that abuts Hoy Field, the baseball field. And as someone who is responsible for athletics, I take a big sigh of relief and think, phew, that should keep construction on that part of the campus busy long enough that I can retire before somebody else decides they really are going to put a building on Hoy Field, because someday that will happen. But I don't think it will happen on my watch, and for that I'm eternally grateful. Speaking of athletics, that's another area where we've seen significant changes, certainly over a generation, with Title IX having been passed when I was a student. But I was also just looking back 10 years ago, taking Jeanette's guidance. If I had talked to you 10 years ago about the success of our athletic program, I would have been very proud to talk about 26 Ivy titles over the last decade. Today, I can tell you, in the last decade, we have won 66 Ivy League titles on our men and our women's teams. All the while doing it while some of these students are earning their 4.0 GPAs. Cornell actually ranks number 2 now in the Ivy League of the total number of, or number 3 of the total number of Ivy championships. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I think it's a wonderful thing for our athletes who choose to come here, because if they're going to choose to be an athlete in a higher education setting, they deserve to reach for the stars, if you will. But it also has energized campus and indeed our alumni. And of course, you only had to be around last year with Cornell's exposure to the Sweet 16 of basketball. And I finally, for the first time in my life, understood how America focuses on basketball when we in Ithaca have been focused on hockey our whole life, because it just gets caught up. Just to close my comments, some things that I see as wonderful opportunities, perhaps challenges as we look ahead. One of the things you hear this generation of students, and now our faculty and research talk about, of course, is sustainability. The fabulous gift that was given to us by David Atkinson and his wife Pat last fall, $80 million to create the Atkinson Center for Sustainable Futures, gives us now a research base to tackle something that I think all of us at one level or another worry about, and particularly if we have children and grandchildren. What will our planet be like when we continue to advance as we are going to advance, and yet put pressure on the planet? The Atkinson Center is going to be looking at sustainability, though, not just from the environmental point of view. It'll have a very specific focus on energy, and that's certainly something we're caught up right in this region, is this whole discussion about do we tap the minerals in our neighborhood of the Marcellus Shale. And my roommate works for ExxonMobil as the vice president for environmental policy. That was my college roommate, so I hear one discussion from her, and I can turn to anybody in Ithaca, and I can hear the other discussion from them. It's a very important topic for us to talk about. So the environment, energy, and then economic sustainability will be another area that the Atkinson Center, and heaven knows in New York State we need to talk a lot about that. Working within and for and through this incredibly diverse population that we now have assembled on campus, how do we do that so that everybody feels welcome on the campus and thrives to their best capability? We're very pleased to see that our graduation rates across any race and ethnicity track pretty well. We have a little bit of work to do still in some of our populations, but the level of academic excellence is not as equal. And that's something that concerns us. Again, everybody should have that same capability, so that is something that we're focusing on. We're going to have a very interesting project in the coming fall called now around the aspect of diversity of religion, working with the Interfaith Youth Corps. There's a young man that if you read the New York Times you would have read about just this week, named Eboo Patel. And Eboo Patel was our Martin Luther King speaker this year. He's 35 years old, an American Muslim who has written a very interesting autobiography, which I think is kind of remarkable, 35 to write an autobiography. But he'd entitled it Acts of Faith. And it's really his story as an American Muslim of how he came to know his Muslim faith, which he didn't at all growing up, because his family was not particularly religious. But as different activities occurred as he got from high school to college and now as an adult, he became much more focused on learning about his own faith and then trying to understand others' faiths, because his first girlfriend was Catholic in high school, and they got sort of only so far, and then matters of faith became an issue. And the second girlfriend actually was Jewish, and that raised a different set of issues. And then his third girlfriend was of a different Muslim sect. So his own path of coming to know his own faith, and in his Martin Luther King speech, he talked about how important it is for this generation of young people, high school and college, to understand issues of faith. Because if you look around the world and where are our points of conflict, they're really around issues of faith. So through the Interfaith Youth Corps, he's encouraging all of them to understand their own faith, even if it's choosing to have no faith at all. That's okay, just understand why you've made that choice. Then understand other people's faith, and then understand the many ways we've come together across faiths to make a difference. And he cited Martin Luther King, of course, borrowing Mahatma Gandhi's commitment to nonviolence as a way of motivating the civil rights movement, and the fact that King didn't give up being a Southern Baptist, but understood how to take from different faiths. And so he's now trying to develop what he calls multi-faith ambassadors on college campuses, and has invited Cornell to be a part of that conversation. And I think given our history as from Cornell United Religious Work and our welcoming of any person for any study, it's appropriate that we participate. Globalization will be another topic that we'll be seeing more and more. I mentioned earlier, our students really know no boundaries. And that's a wonderful opportunity, except if you have a group of students doing service learning in Kenya, as we did several years ago when the political riots broke out, and you discover that the safe way to get them home is through Uganda. And I have to say that was sort of an interesting way for us to have a conversation over the course of the holiday break. But how do we encourage our students to be engaged globally, how to do it safely, and how to also encourage the international connections that we've had for so many years. And finally, as I did when I talked to you 7 years ago, I want to just comment about our students' engagement with the community in which they live, most notably Ithaca, but also Tompkins County in New York. We will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of our Public Service Center this coming year. And it's remarkable that we now see some 7,000 students each year find some way to get engaged in the community. It might be a one day of service of Into the Streets, when we have literally now 2 days of it, because there aren't enough places in Ithaca to get them to go work in one day. Or it could be having them involved in service as part of their coursework. They are a very engaged generation, and that's something that I think we as residents of Ithaca and Tompkins County benefit from, and for which I'm grateful. Cornell as a university has been recognized increasingly as an engaged institution, and recognized recently on the President's Honor Roll. And you will hear a very interesting discussion about another way that Cornell may get engaged in the coming weeks as we get ready to respond to the invitation that Mayor Bloomberg has issued from the City of New York, which is to create a technology campus in New York City as a way of economic development for that area. And Cornell submitted a letter of interest, and we're expecting this summer the formal request for proposals. Some 30 institutions around the world have responded, but it's trying to think about how might you bring the technology innovation to New York City as a way of generating economic development. I think he looks at Silicon Valley and at the 128 corridor around Boston and says, can we do some of that here in the city? And Of course, Cornellians being Cornellians, we think, well, we're already in New York with half our campus. Why wouldn't we be the chosen one? But Stanford has its own view about why they might not be, they should be the chosen one. So it'll be a very interesting discussion and to see where that goes. I hope that as we welcome the Centennial class and bid farewell to the class of 2011, that they as a group of professionals, whatever profession they select, will have the fortunate connection to their employer that I believe you must have had for you to choose to stay connected to Cornell through the Cornell Retirees Association. We sort of take it for granted that where they work is someplace they want to stay connected with after they finish their official employment. And not only do you do it through this kind of exercise, but in so many ways that you continue to volunteer, to serve as casual employees, as temporary employees, to help us out as advisors. If our students of today can have that kind of connection to wherever they find a place of employment, they will have a life richly endowed. Of that I'm convinced. And I want to thank you for all that you've done for Cornell over the many, many years you had official employment and how you stay connected. So thank you very much.